everybody likes to play the blame game. And I think most fans, most people believe that, hey, college football got worse over the weekend. Who deserves the most fingers pointed in their direction? Scott, we'll start with you.
It's got to be Larry Scott. It has to be. I mean, he inherited a league that was in great shape, a little old-fashioned, but still in great shape as the Pac-10. He got really aggressive right off the very beginning. David and I were there in Kansas City when the invitation was to turn it to the Pac-16 back in 2010. It didn't work out, but they did get a quality team in Utah, and in Colorado has kind of languished there. But ever since then, there's been nothing but incredible hubris and just horrible business moves. I mean, to get basically a skyrise studio or offices in San Francisco to the Big Ten wanted to do a wholesale sharing agreement with them where they would share games in every sport and cooperate, and they backed off of that. And then you just look over the years, they ended up blowing up a chance to have NBC and Comcast be part of their TV package. And finally, with the Pac-12 networks, they partnered with nobody, and then they got no viewership. So I think he's the one who set the entire table for the downfall of the Pac-12, made it vulnerable, made it economically depressed when compared to its peer conferences. And George Kliavkoff is just kind of there, stuck holding the knife at the end.
And you managed to not even talk about the Comcast overpayments and the conference offices. These are all when you talk about the failures of the Pac-12 over the last decade, it's a long list. Sam, who are you pointing the finger at for college football fans to get mad at?
I think it's a combination of a couple of figures. I'll start with Scott. Scott's right. I think Larry Scott and George Kliavkoff, both of the last two Pac-12 commissioners, I think, share a lot of blame here. Scott for the reasons Scott said. Kliavkoff because of inaction, because they had a chance in 2021 after Texas and OU left the Big 12 to add Big 12 members and solidify themselves, and they chose not to. And then the Big 12 ended up being a little bit more aggressive, adding 4 new members at that time. Then when Brett Yormark came in, they got a TV deal done before going to open market, well before going to open market, which would have been 2025. They did it 3 years early, and that ended up boxing the Pac-12 out of the TV negotiations. So that's those commissioners I'll give some blame to, but also I think the TV networks have a lot of blame here because they are the ones deciding what inventory is valuable enough to keep and what that inventory is not valuable enough to include in a major conference. And if TV money and TV networks were not the primary carrot dangling here, then I don't think we'd be in this situation. At most major realignment moves in the last 2-3 decades can be traced back to the chasing of TV dollars. And I think it's impossible to overlook the roles of the TV networks in these realignment discussions.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go off the board and I'm going to say everyone. I think, you look at college football, 30 years ago, whatever, 1984, when the Supreme Court decision is passed. You're basically Smeagol at that point, right? Well, now you've been chasing that TV money for a long time. You've gotten addicted to it. And if you get to the finish line and you're obsessed with this one thing and you're something sort of ugly and recognizable, a Gollum, if you will, then you have no one to blame but yourself. It's the same thing that these athletic departments do from day to day. When you are addicted to the money that boosters provide your program, well, then when you end up making a coach hire that maybe you don't love because they say, we're making this hire or my money's gone, well, then that's what you've done. You've sold out to the boosters and you've lost control, even though you're the person whose name's on the decision. Somebody else is making the actual decision. Well, it's the same thing at a macro level here, okay? You've sold out to the TV money. So if you want to say, well, it's not us, it's ESPN and Fox that are making all these decisions. Yeah, because you've sold out and you've allowed the TV networks to control all of college football. You've made a bunch of little micro decisions over the last 30 years. You've gotten more and more addicted to the TV money. We have to operate this way. We have to be a nonprofit. We can't make players employees. We can't share any revenue. We're going to become $1 billion business and keep money away from the players, and we have to continue living paycheck to paycheck. We can't have any coffers. Well, now we have to have 150, $200 million budgets, but we still have to act like we're broke. This is what happens. You've been addicted to this TV money for a long time, and at the very end, you're something ugly and unrecognizable from where you were when you started. And so when you have conferences where Rutgers and Washington are together, and UCF and Utah are together, and that's obviously what happens when all of college football gets addicted to this money. You become something totally different, and it's hard to watch. But spare me, pointing to Larry Scott, pointing to the TV networks. You all did this. You've been doing this for 30 years. So I blame everyone.
And I'd also blame the fact that the product itself has not been able to sell itself. And they've had some tremendous players. I remember watching Christian McCaffrey in person for a certain Rose Bowl performance. But when you're looking at the last 2 years, they've only had 6 total Pac-12 games that have had at least 3.5 million viewers. And, sometimes the games are late at night. But when you're looking at, even the Pac-12 title game had less than 6 million viewers. And that was Utah USC. But, Washington, Oregon, it's 3.6. I mean, that's a very low-level Big Ten or SEC game. So that's up to the commissioners, the schools, make themselves more marketable. And the viewership in that region, and then, of course, across the country, just wasn't interested enough, which is, of course, why the TV companies weren't interested enough in paying them a premium price tag.
But why is that a problem? Hold on, I'm going to interject there, Scott. Why is it a huge deal if a Pac-12 championship game gets 3 million versus a Big Ten championship game gets 7 million? Because I think it goes back to David's point, is that they've sold out for TV dollars, so that becomes the measurement of success. Why is that the measurement of success? College football has 133 FBS programs. It has 10 conferences. It isn't made for everybody for 5, 6, 7, 8 million people to watch every single major game. There are pockets of it. So I don't necessarily feel like I would put blame on the Pac-12 or its fans for this, because that not every conference is created equal. Not every group is created equal. I think it's okay to exist where some conferences have 8 million people watching their games, and some conferences have 2 or 3, or even less if you're in the group of 5. So I don't necessarily put blame on the Pac-12, because that's not what college football was meant to be. It's not the NFL where every game's going to get monster ratings.
Yeah, I just think I roll my eyes when we hear all of these conversations about, well, we had no choice. We have to do this. We have to follow the money. Okay, maybe right now you have to choose, but you've made a lot of little decisions over time, and not just sort of good or bad decisions, just money decisions that say, hey, TV money is what this is all about. And I think, again, fans want to go and beat their chest when, look at our SEC paychecks, look at our Big Ten paychecks. Fans don't see that money. It does not affect fans. And this idea that and I think around the last when realignment, the last round of realignment, the first of the modern, I guess, around that time, Scott, of 2008, 2009, when the Big Ten elected to expand, I feel like the tone and the tenor of conversation in college sports shifted, where all of a sudden fans were very aware of, our league makes this much, that league makes this much. I don't remember this at all when I was growing up. I don't remember people caring. I don't remember people knowing. And all of a sudden, that is the measure of a league. And if one league, and part of that is the gulf growing, and I understand not wanting to fall behind. But again, if somebody was in charge of this sport, you could see the foresight, and having somebody step in and say, hey, you guys, back to your corners. Let's not get into a brawl here where we become something we don't want to become. Let's just chill. And again, I really am a big believer in, I think the more we've seen, I thought this for several years, the idea of pooling your television rights and having some sort of merit-based revenue sharing, even within the leagues. It doesn't make sense that Ohio State and Rutgers get the same amount of money from the Big Ten. It doesn't make sense that Alabama and Vanderbilt get the same amount of money. And they can say, well, rising tide lifts all boats. Okay, that's fine, but it still doesn't make sense, And so the economics of college sports, we could do a 3-hour podcast if we wanted to about how none of it makes sense. And when you have a situation where a lot of things don't make sense, you end up in a place where the entire landscape doesn't make sense. and that's where we are. And I think even though things have been trending in this direction for a long time, I mean, I don't remember, I remember around 2010, everybody was talking about, it's going to be 4 major conferences, 4 super conferences, 16 teams. Well, the last, I'd say 4 or 5 years, it's been pretty clear that we're going into a 2 power league situation. It's not good for the sport, and I think in the college football, the NFL was built off of the college football's popularity. College football is much older, much more established, and they've turned into something different that people obviously love. But I love the NFL. I also love college football. They're very, very different things, and I think that naturally you're sort of evolving into something that's more and more like the NFL because that's where the TV money is. And I'm not even sure, honestly. I think there's a fear that this will backfire and people will love things less. And maybe that's true. I don't actually, that's true. I just am bemoaning the loss of something that looks different than the NFL. And I love college football for all of its regional identity and all of those rivalries. And I actually am not sure that a reckoning is coming or that a bubble pop is coming, or that when you axe out the NC States or the Texas Techs or the Oregon States and all of a sudden you don't have those people that want to watch the big time games. I'm actually not sure that that's coming, but I like that it existed and it doesn't exist anymore. And I think the sport is worse off for that. And it sucks.